The fluorescent lights in my research lab hummed quietly as I adjusted my microscope. Another late night at the pharmaceutical company, but I didn't mind. The solitude of the lab had become my sanctuary, a place where complex molecular structures made more sense than family dynamics ever did. I'd been lurking on various family support forums for months, but until now, I never felt compelled to share my story. At 34, I found myself needing perspective because my family had finally crossed a line I couldn't ignore. No matter what I did, I was somehow always cast as the villain in their narrative. The weight of this ongoing family drama, with no end in sight, had begun to take its toll on both my mental and emotional well-being. I've built my career from scratch, working my way up to research and development manager at one of Boston's leading pharmaceutical companies. Every late-night experiment, every grant proposal, every breakthrough and setback, I earned it all myself. My house in the suburbs, my car, my savings, all products of my own hard work. You wouldn't believe the dysfunctional family dynamics I had to overcome to reach this point in my life. Let me give you some background on our family history. Since turning 18, I've been completely self-sufficient, financially, emotionally, and intellectually. The way my parents raised my brother Marcus and me was problematic at best. My mother worked in real estate, and my father was an investment advisor. They weren't exactly winning any parenting awards. We were a middle-class suburban family outside of Boston, presenting the perfect image of an American family. Good neighborhood, good schools. We had it all, at least on the surface. But beneath that carefully crafted exterior, there was an unwritten rule that defined my entire childhood. I was expected to be the responsible one, the role model, while my younger brother Marcus, now 26, could do no wrong. From an early age, the disparities were painfully obvious. One incident stands out particularly clearly. When Marcus was 8 and I was 16, I was grounded for a month after getting a B+ on a single chemistry test. "You're wasting your potential, Evelyn," they said. That same month, when Marcus was caught stealing from Dad's wallet for the third time, they just shrugged it off as a phase. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern that defined our entire childhood. Every time Marcus made a mistake, and believe me, there were many, it was dismissed. "He'll figure it out eventually," my mother would say with that dismissive wave of her manicured hand, or "he's just sensitive," which was code for "let's pretend this never happened." Meanwhile, if I showed even the slightest imperfection, it felt like the world was ending. The pressure was constant and suffocating. "Why aren't you pushing yourself harder, Evelyn? You need to set a better example for your brother. Don't you know he looks up to you?" I worked part-time at a local pharmacy, volunteered at the hospital's research department, took every AP Science class available, and maintained a perfect GPA because medical schools look for that kind of thing. Marcus, meanwhile, barely attended class, spending most of his time in his room developing his entrepreneurial mindset, which mainly consisted of watching cryptocurrency trading videos and dreaming up get-rich-quick schemes. Yet somehow, I was the one who needed to try harder. Nothing I achieved was ever enough. They'd question why I didn't get an A+ in advanced biology. When I was selected as valedictorian, my mother's first response wasn't congratulations. It was, "I hope this doesn't make your brother feel bad about his grades." This pattern continued into our adult years. While Marcus struggled through his business classes at the private university our parents paid for, everyone would say, "At least you're trying, sweetie." Not everyone is cut out for traditional education. He dropped out after one semester because it was too restrictive for his entrepreneurial spirit. My parents covered his rent for what was supposed to be a gap year to explore his startup options, which turned into 5 years of failed ventures and mounting debt. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through state university, mornings at the pharmacy and evenings in the university's research lab. I still remember the night I moved out at 18. I'd saved enough from my lab assistant job to rent a tiny studio apartment with a roommate. When I told my father I was leaving, he said, "Well, you'll need to start paying rent if you're staying here anyway." Yet they never asked Marcus for a penny when he was still living at home at 25 because networking for his business ventures was emotionally draining. They even gave him a monthly allowance for startup expenses. They never offered to help with my college tuition or living expenses. Not that I expected them to, but it still stung watching them bend over backwards for Marcus while I was on my own. I worked multiple jobs, took out student loans, and survived on more instant noodles than I care to remember. Meanwhile, Marcus lived with them well into his mid-20s, bouncing from one failed venture to another, always with a ready excuse for why it wasn't his fault. The crypto market is manipulated, or the startup ecosystem isn't ready for my innovative ideas. He never took responsibility for his actions, always blaming external factors. And our parents enabled this behavior at every turn, making excuses and covering his tracks. I completed my pharmacy degree with honors while working in research labs, eventually landing an entry-level position at the pharmaceutical company. I climbed the ladder from there, putting in countless hours and seizing every opportunity for additional training and certification. My parents never offered help, and I never asked. Yet they had no problem approaching me whenever Marcus needed a little capital injection for his next big opportunity. Fast forward to last week. It was remarkable in itself that my mother called. You have to understand, my mother doesn't call to chat. She never calls to say hello, check on my latest research, or ask about my life. She only calls when she wants something. I'm talking about the kind of call that starts with overly sweet small talk, as if they're buttering you up before dropping the real reason for the call. That's exactly what happened last week. "How's work going, honey? Still at that pharmaceutical company? Have you been eating properly?" She began, which was so out of character, I immediately knew something was wrong. My mother doesn't care about my diet. All she knows about my job is that I do something with medicine. She couldn't even remember the name of my company during our last conversation at Thanksgiving 3 months ago, despite my 5 years there. She was trying too hard to sound casual, and the whole conversation felt forced. She asked about my boyfriend. I've been single since my engagement ended last year. Another story where Marcus played a significant role. My apartment. I've owned my house for 2 years. Even my garden, which I've never had time for between research and work. Each question was like a small paper cut, reminding me how little she actually knew about my life. Then she hit me with it. Marcus was in trouble again. I wasn't surprised to Marcus and trouble were constant companions. But I wasn't prepared for the scale of it. He had apparently accumulated $600,000 in debt. Not student loans or credit card debt that could be chalked up to youthful mistakes. No, he'd borrowed from some very questionable characters, and they were now seriously demanding their money back. My mother's voice cracked with tears, a manipulation tactic I'd seen her use countless times before. She wasted no time piling on the guilt. "You've done so well for yourself with your research career. You've always been the strong one. Marcus isn't like you. He's an entrepreneur, a free spirit. He needs your help. You know how sensitive he gets under pressure." As I sat in my private lab office, staring at the rows of test tubes and experimental data I'd been analyzing, I tried to process what she'd just said. $600,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. How does anyone accumulate that much debt? When I asked how it happened, my mother dismissed the question like she was swatting away an annoying fly in her designer kitchen. "That's not important right now," she said, with that same condescending tone that always made my stomach churn. "What matters is that he's your brother. Family helps family. We've always taught you that. Family comes first. For years, they'd used that line, "family helps family," as their go-to phrase whenever they needed me to bail Marcus out. They used it when they asked me to invest in his revolutionary crypto trading algorithm, which he lost within 2 weeks. They said it after his girlfriend kicked him out of their luxury condo. They said it when they wanted my credit card information for his temporary business expenses. They used it every time they needed me to cover for Marcus, fix something for him, or clean up one of his messes. And each time, I swallowed my frustration and did what they asked. I didn't want to be the villain. Because deep down, there was still that little girl in the research lab, hoping that maybe this time they would recognize my help, my sacrifice, my constant saving of their precious boy. But $600,000. That wasn't just a favor or a loan. That was 5 years of research grants. That was my safety net, my emergency fund, my future security. This time, I couldn't do it. I told her no. For the first time in my life, I straightened my spine, gripped my lab coat for courage, and told her I was sorry, but I couldn't save Marcus from the disaster he'd created. The conversation shifted in about 2 seconds flat. My mother transformed from pleading to furious. The metamorphosis would have been fascinating from a scientific perspective had it not been so terrifying. The gentle, worried voice of moments ago vanished, replaced by an icy, cutting tone that could have frozen my test samples. She started screaming. "You're being selfish," her voice rising with each word. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. You're abandoning your family when they need you most." She even pulled out the nuclear option. "Do you want his blood on your hands? He borrowed from some dangerous people. What if he?" The manipulation was almost laughable in its transparency. But her attempt to make me responsible for Marcus's poor decisions yet again wasn't funny at all. As if his choices, his mistakes, and his complete lack of accountability were somehow my responsibility to fix. I ended the call right there. I couldn't listen anymore. My chest felt tight, like I'd just run a failed experiment 20 times in a row. And my hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the end call button. But beneath the familiar weight of family expectations, the shame, and the fear, there was relief. Relief that I had finally stood my ground. For once. I've worked too hard to be dragged down by others' poor decisions. I've spent years building my research career, establishing my independence, and creating a life that doesn't revolve around being Marcus's safety net. I couldn't bear the thought of throwing all of that away, of potentially compromising my own financial stability to enable his recklessness one more time. But here's the thing about growing up in a dysfunctional family. The guilt creeps in almost immediately, even when you know you're making the right decision and are absolutely certain you're acting in your own best interests. Even though I know I'm not the villain, my family has a way of twisting the narrative, making me question my own judgment, making me feel like one. And this time was no different. I can't shake the thought that maybe I made the wrong choice, even though I know saying no is right. Standing up to my family felt right in the moment, but now I'm left wondering if I've made everything worse. What if they're right? Am I being selfish? What if something happens to Marcus because I refuse to help? The logical, scientific part of my brain, the part that's gotten me through years of research and development, knows I'm not responsible for my brother's choices or their consequences. But there's still that part of me, that little girl who spent countless hours in the school science lab trying to earn her parents' approval, that keeps asking, what if? To be honest, I have no idea what comes next. That call was just the beginning. I was completely unprepared for what happened afterward. I suspect this isn't over, especially not with Marcus. My parents have never been good at accepting no for an answer. But I'm trying to stay strong, like the steel backbone of my lab equipment. I'm trying to remember that I have the right to protect myself and my future. As this situation develops, I suspect I'll need more guidance. I'll update soon. First update. First, I want to thank everyone who left supportive comments on my previous post. I honestly didn't expect such a strong response. The past week has seen an exponential increase in tension, and not in a positive direction. Remember how I sensed this wasn't over? Well, I was right. The harassment campaign began almost immediately after I hung up on my mother. It started with a barrage of text messages, the usual guilt-tripping repertoire. But then things took a much darker turn. Last Tuesday, I received an alert from my bank about suspicious activity. Someone had attempted to access my account using what appeared to be stolen personal information. I got a direct call from the bank's fraud department. Their security system had flagged a large transfer attempt from my account due to an unrecognized IP address. The fraud investigator explained that whoever tried to access my account had my mother's maiden name, my social security number, and even the name of my first chemistry set, all common security questions. Marcus would be the only one with access to all that information. The realization that my own brother would attempt to steal from me hit harder than any failed experiment. I immediately updated all my security questions and passwords. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was a whole new level of betrayal. But here's where it gets even more bizarre. My Aunt Diana, one of the few relatives I actually trust, called me yesterday. Apparently, my parents have been spinning a completely different version of events to everyone in the family. They've painted me as some heartless scientist living in luxury while her brother suffers, claiming I'm hoarding my research money while poor Marcus is fighting for his life. Thank goodness Aunt Diana called to hear my side. Bless her rational mind. She was shocked when I told her about the attempted bank fraud. She also revealed something I didn't know. Apparently, Marcus had been trying to borrow money from various family members over the past few months, each time with a different story. He told our grandmother he needed money for medical bills, told our cousin Mark it was for a guaranteed investment opportunity, told Uncle Steve it was to launch a small business. He told our parents he owed money to dangerous people. None of these stories added up. This morning delivered the real kicker. My father sent me an email, his first direct communication since this whole mess started. It was cold, calculating, and frankly, a bit threatening. Here's part of what he wrote. Your actions are forcing us to reconsider your position in this family. Your mother and I have always provided for you, supported your education, and given you every opportunity to succeed. Your current success in the pharmaceutical industry is a direct result of our sacrifices. If you continue to abandon your brother in his time of need, there will be consequences. Think carefully about your next move. I actually laughed at the part about them funding my education. I'm still paying off my student loans. But the threat was clear. Help Marcus, or risk being cut off from the family. They're trying to use family ties as leverage, thinking they can control me with the threat of isolation. What they don't realize is that I've been effectively cut off from them for years. Our relationship has always been conditional. I have to take care of Marcus. I have to play the role they've assigned me, and I have to accept their warped definition of family loyalty. I've discussed the attempted account hack with our company's IT security team. They're helping me secure all my devices and accounts connected to my work. We can't risk any compromise of our research data. I've also started documenting every single text, email, and voicemail. As much as it pains me, I need to gather evidence against my own family. The strangest part of all this? Marcus's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, depending on their current status, sent me a WhatsApp message. Marcus has been acting really weird lately, she said. We've never been close, but she was concerned enough to reach out after hearing him make cryptic comments about getting what's his and teaching people lessons. I'm installing security cameras at my house this weekend. Maybe I'm being overly cautious, but after the bank account incident, I'm not taking any chances. I never thought I'd need to protect myself from my own family, but I guess that's where we are now. $600,000 is just the tip of the iceberg. For those wondering why I don't just pay the money to make this all go away, even if I wanted to, which I don't, based on Aunt Diana's revelations about Marcus's previous borrowing attempts, his total debt is likely much higher. This isn't about helping my brother anymore. It's about enabling a destructive pattern that needs to end. I have an appointment with a financial advisor next week to review all my accounts and implement additional security measures to understand my options if things escalate further. I'm also considering speaking with a lawyer about the attempted fraud, not necessarily to press charges. If anything significant happens, which seems likely given the current trajectory, I'll post another update. Thank you for letting me vent, and thanks to everyone who commented on my previous posts sharing similar experiences. It helps to know I'm not alone in dealing with this kind of family dysfunction. Second update. After the attempted bank fraud I described in my last update, I decided to confront Marcus face to face. What followed was both shocking and entirely predictable. I went to Marcus's place yesterday evening. It's a luxury condo in a questionable part of the city, the kind of place that screams, living beyond your means. When he finally opened the door, he was unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing what looked like an expensive but wrinkled designer shirt. His first words, "Took you long enough to show up. No apology for trying to hack my bank account. No explanation for the $600,000 debt. Just entitlement, as usual." When I confronted him about the bank fraud, his response was chilling. "Mom and Dad said if things got desperate enough, you'd give in." "I was just speeding up the process," he said, so casually, like he was discussing the weather rather than admitting to a crime. That's when I noticed something disturbing about his condo. There were multiple phones and what appeared to be credit card statements with different names scattered across his designer coffee table. He quickly swept them into a drawer before I could get a better look. My stomach dropped as I realized this might be more than just my bank account. My parents arrived just as I was about to leave. Marcus had apparently texted them. They stormed into his condo like they owned the place. Mom was crying, of course, and Dad was furious. This led to the most heated family confrontation we've ever had. Dad started by expressing their disappointment in my selfish actions. Mom wailed about how they had failed as parents because I'd turned out to be so heartless. The worst part? When I brought up the bank fraud attempt, they actually defended it. Mom said, "He was desperate. What choice did he have when you refused to help? People make mistakes when they're backed into a corner." Dad nodded in agreement. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So identity theft is okay if it's family?" I asked. Their response? "Family helps family, no matter what." That's when I lost it. Years of suppressed frustration erupted like a failed chemical reaction. I laid out how their favoritism had affected me, how their enabling had turned Marcus into who he is today. I cited specific examples. Their refusal to help with my college tuition while funding Marcus's failed ventures. Their repeated attempts to coerce me into giving him money. Their constant emotional manipulation. Marcus's response? "At least I'm not a stuck-up lab rat who thinks she's better than everyone else." He smirked. Mom actually nodded in approval. That's when I had the crucial realization. They would never change. Never. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about a fundamentally toxic family dynamic that would never improve. I pulled out my phone and played back the entire recorded conversation. You should have seen their faces when they realized I had proof of them supporting bank fraud. "This recording goes straight to the police if anything happens to my accounts again," I stated. "And this time, I will press charges, Marcus." Mom started wailing about how I was threatening them. Dad called me manipulative. For the first time, Marcus stood there looking worried. As I was leaving, Dad grabbed my arm and said something I'll never forget. "If you walk out that door, don't ever expect to be welcomed in this family again." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "That sounds more like a promise than a threat," before walking out. When I got home to my quiet house, I had dozens of missed calls and messages. I blocked their numbers. Then I opened my laptop and started composing an email to my entire extended family, including screenshots of threatening messages, a transcript of the recorded conversation, and documentation of the bank fraud attempt. I'm done being the family scapegoat. I'm done being controlled. I'm done being Marcus's personal research grant. Above all, I'm done keeping their secrets. This will probably be my final update. I have a feeling everyone's situation is about to change dramatically. Right now, I'm focusing on protecting myself, which includes upgrading security systems and consulting with a lawyer about potential restraining orders. Thank you to everyone who's been following this situation and offering support. Your comments gave me the courage to stand up for myself today. Third update, 1 month later. Everything has changed since my last update a month ago. After the confrontation at Marcus's condo, I decided to stop protecting the family secrets. When I finally exposed the truth, here's what happened. Remember that email I mentioned sending to the extended family? Well, I decided to take it a step further. I made a detailed social media post with evidence, screenshots of the attempted bank fraud, Marcus's own admissions of guilt, and a recording of my parents justifying his behavior. I wasn't seeking revenge. I just wanted the truth to be known. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, other victims of Marcus's schemes started coming forward. Cousin Tim revealed that Marcus had borrowed $5,000 for a non-existent business venture. Aunt Diana disclosed that he had convinced her to co-sign a loan she's now repaying. Even the mystery of my grandmother's missing heirloom jewelry from last Christmas suddenly had a likely suspect. But the most significant revelation came from Marcus's ex-roommate, who revealed how Marcus had used his identity to open multiple credit cards. He'd been too ashamed to come forward, believing no one would take him seriously against my parents' perfect son. Someone at a pharmaceutical company where Marcus had recently interviewed saw the social media post. They became concerned about his history with financial fraud. Needless to say, he didn't get the position. My parents, standing in their social circle, took a massive hit. For years, they'd portrayed themselves as perfect parents, dealing with one ungrateful scientist daughter while supporting their struggling entrepreneur son. Now everyone knew the truth. After complaining to their country club friends about my selfishness, they started getting cold shoulders. Suddenly, Dad's golf buddies were too busy for their weekly games. Mom tried to minimize the damage by accusing me of lying, but the evidence was irrefutable. They couldn't explain away their own recorded words, the text messages, or the bank records. Their carefully constructed image crumbled. When Marcus's current roommate saw the post, it was the real game changer. He had no idea about Marcus's history when he agreed to share the luxury condo. Within a week, Marcus received an eviction notice. Turns out people don't want to live with someone who attempts bank fraud. From what I've heard, Marcus is now working 3 jobs to pay off his debts. He's finally facing the consequences of his actions, and his credit is ruined. Interestingly, my parents have gone silent on social media. No more quotes about ungrateful children or passive-aggressive posts about family values. My own life has never been better. That promotion to senior research manager I was up for, I got it. I've been able to focus on my professional and personal development without the constant drain of family drama and financial exploitation. What a concept. I'm even starting to date someone who respects boundaries and understands the importance of financial independence. According to the few family members I still talk to, mom and dad don't mention me at all anymore. No more guilt trips. No more manipulation attempts. They finally realized that sometimes social accountability is the natural consequence of actions. To anyone dealing with toxic family members, sometimes letting the truth speak for itself is more effective than legal action. The wrong people will reveal themselves, and the right people will listen. My family's greatest fear wasn't legal consequences. It was people discovering who they really were. By speaking up instead of staying quiet, I not only freed myself from their control, but also gave others the courage to stand up for themselves. Thank you to everyone who has supported and followed this journey. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free. It's okay when the family you were born into isn't the one you need. Now I'm building my own network of people who value integrity, accountability, and genuine care for others. This will be my final update. The story is over, and I'm ready to start a new chapter, free from guilt, deception, and the endless burden of supporting others. And you know what? That feels better than any legal victory ever could.